Thank you, Jack.
I don't remember exactly when that was stopped, but my parents, especially my mother, Bernice Blatch, was one of the persons that fought that the school would be open. They kept the children out of school because they finally got tired of it, even though, as he said, most of them had a lot of kids and needed the money. They realized at a certain time that it was just not right. So my mother, a guy named McFay, Emily Miller, Gibson, Mr. Gibson, and some others who I cannot recall right now, they fought the school board and said, enough is enough. And this is when it was changed and we were allowed to go to school the same months.
And sitting next to this fourth generation Ella, his father, I'm sure, have always told him how his father would take care of us. We would work the fields with the butlers. We always talked about there was nobody like the butlers, and we never looked at it as black and white. We looked at it as economics. He said we had to, work, and we did, because we made decent living. And we didn't have to go out, and stand in line begging. None of us was on welfare. We made our way, and we lived throughout the year. We were educated. Some people say, well, how did you do it? How did you start school in 1939? Well, they had no guidelines then. As long as you could learn, you can go to school. Mrs. May Brown Golden will let you come to her school. And that's why I always believe in early childhood education, because at the age of 4, I was enrolled in school. I never stopped. I graduated from high school at the age of 16 and never stopped learning, never stopped working.
Sylvia, thank you. What a hand for her, huh? Anyone else on the panel have a comment about those days of segregation and some of the things and topics that we've come up with today?
When other areas of the country were troubled by segregation, and my year I was a senior in high school was the first year that Pompano High School was integrated, and it just seemed like a fact of life. And then going on to school, going on to Florida State, there was a very near equal relation number in the colleges in Tallahassee at that time. But really, I guess we just grew up without it ever being a really big deal. Unfortunately, there were areas where there was a lot of dissension and trouble.
Very good. Well, thankfully, things have changed. Margaret?
When I first came here in 1952 from southern Ohio, I had a young woman working for me by the name of Lorene Scott, who is probably known to all of you. She was just 18, and she was helping me. I had small children, and she was helping me with some housework then. And so I said to her, we lived so close to the beach, just a block away, and now I live 3 blocks away. But I said, Lorene, it must be nice to be able to come to the ocean in the summertime when it's so hot and go swimming. And she said, oh no, we're not allowed to go swimming here. And I said, you're not? Where do you go to the water? And she said, we go down south of Fort Lauderdale. And I thought to myself, how sad that I had just come from Ohio, new to this community, and I could go swimming, but she had lived here all of her life, and she was not allowed to go in the water. None of the children over there on the west side of Dixie were allowed to go to our beautiful ocean. And I just thought, things have to change, and they have changed, haven't they?
The beach area began to receive some attention with the construction of the first bridge across the waterway in 1917. In 1919, a women's club was formed with a membership of 21 ladies paying 10 cents monthly dues. One of the club's first accomplishments was the construction of a pavilion on the beach near the present fishing pier, and proved popular for dances and picnics.
I can remember as a child, before what is now called the Butler Bridge was built, there was a key turn bridge, and we would go over there. Grandpa Jones used to sit in a white chair out under an Australian pine tree, and he always had a bag of candy. So he was always good to share his orange slices or wrapped up candy. And then when a boat came along and we had to turn the bridge, there was a key, a big metal piece that fit on the side of the bridge, and you would put it in the middle of the bridge. There was an apparatus that as you turn that key, the bridge would then run parallel with the water. The boats could go by on either side, then they would turn the bridge back. And what a thrill that was to get to help turn that bridge. Then the Butler Bridge was built in the mid-60s, and they did away with that old key turn bridge.
Where was that bridge located? In the same
It was
spot that the
located
Butler
right
Bridge is?
down next to where Bill Stewart's Riverview restaurant. And in fact, my father bought the right-of-way for that as it came out in the early 60s when my father went from single-family construction to multifamily, and he built the Penthouse North condominiums right there at the bridge. So he bought that right-of-way on the other side of the road to what is now, as you come over the Butler Bridge, as you look down on the left-hand side, you see the still beautiful Penthouse North condominiums.
Very good. Barney, you comment?
Yeah, I was just going to comment. The approach to the old bridge is basically still there. If you go by Sullivan Park where it dead ends, and they have some benches there, but that was a one-lane bridge. So if you were going one way, you would wait for the car to come across. And she said it was a turnstile like turning a big key. And I'd like to add that I think some of the little treats that you had there, Mr. Jones, was to get the young guys to help them turn that bridge too, because it's, come on, help turn this thing.
We figured that out. We thought it was a privilege, and then we got the candy.
It's like the Bernie, and we would turn it for him.
In the 1900s, what is now the Riverview Restaurant was formerly a packing house for produce and seafood, with a dormitory upstairs for the workers. Importing bootleg whiskey from the nearby Bahamas became a big business in Deerfield, owing in part to the fact that Deerfield's huge stretch of coastline was almost completely unpatrolled. The Hillsborough Canal was turned into an unloading and distribution site for rum runners. While illegal, Deerfield was considered a frontier outpost, and the local citizenry, as well as the law, looked the other way as the wealthy, famous, and even infamous stopped in to drink and gamble.
The city incorporated, they had one policeman, he rode a motorcycle. And I don't know whether he caught speeders or bootleggers or rum runners. During that day, during Prohibition, these rum runners had these big Cadillacs and LaSalle automobiles. They were touring cars. And behind the driver's seat, they filled up with liquor from somewhere else, I don't know where, and covered it with canvas and put new stronger springs on the car, but they'd catch them in Deerfield, and they take, when they did, during Prohibition, they'd take the liquor and go out in the woods somewhere and break it all up. You could go out in the woods sometime and find a pile of all kind of colored glass, and that was where they'd broken up liquor that they had caught when they were trying to get through town.
And people would come across that old iron bridge and they had my 2 slot machines, but I had a nickel and a dime machine. Later I got a quarter machine. They would come across that, and that was a filling station, and they hadn't them filling station in a good while, so I'd sell them gas. They'd put a few nickels in there, and I made a living off the slot machine.
The Kennedys supposedly owned several big schooners, and they would bring the whiskey over from the Bahamas and meet them in the middle of the Gulf Stream, and then the small boats would bring it into the beach or up in the Hillsborough Canal inlet or on up the Hillsborough Canal.
It had changed hands between state and federal governments on numerous occasions, been the subject of litigation numerous times for more than 100 years, and to this day remains one of the most unique and relatively undeveloped pieces of property in Broward County. It's known as Capone Island, and while it's a park today, there's as much mystery to the 55-acre tract now as there was when legend has it serving as a refuge for the notorious mobster while he fled from federal agents in the late 20s.
There are still various tales about Deerfield Island, which has alternatively been called Capone Island. How did it get this name, even informally? Anything probably because of the rum running and the things that were going on at that time?
As a boy, young kid, myself and some of the kids would take a small boat and go over to what was the peninsula, and there was a lot of things to do over there and get away from everything. But we did run into a still over there at one time, and we got summarily chased away. So there was a little of that going on. There wasn't rum running; they were making it right there.
On the island?
On the island.
On the island.
In the late evening hours of September 17, 1926, a hurricane struck the lower east coast of Florida. Although the town of Deerfield survived that hurricane, it would barely survive two more disasters that followed. In 1928, another hurricane struck. Extensive damage to the agricultural district, combined with the collapse of the Florida land boom, plunged South Florida deeper into economic depression, which worsened the following year when the country entered the Great Depression. Many of the town's 1,800 residents survived by working on such projects as the construction of William L. Kester's beach cottages and the maintenance of Federal Highway US 1. The only other major source of employment in the area was the Boca Raton Hotel. In effect, the people were drawn together by the common cause of poverty. Shortly after the outbreak of World War II, attacks by German submarines on commercial shipping offshore became a regular occurrence off Florida's coast. By necessity, the city was blacked out. Armed men patrolled the beach, and plane spotters were stationed at strategic locations around town.
During the war, because the shipping lanes were right off the coast of Florida, both north and south, there were blackouts along the beach areas. And people would tell me about their experiences of either living in the cottages along the beach or coming to the beach to watch the ocean at nighttime during the blackouts. And they would say that sometimes when there was heat lightning present or there were storms out on the horizon, they could see the silhouettes of the tankers and supply ships moving up and down on along the coast. And it was an exciting part of history of the war. And also they told some stories about seeing the silhouettes of some U-boats out there too.
As kids, there was a lot of military activity in town. There wasn't a lot to do, but you could watch what was going on, and we would camp in the woods, I guess north of the old Baptist church. And one night a tank came and just out of nowhere, and I guess on maneuvers, scared us to death, so we got out of there. But one time the soldiers were on maneuvers, and they were coming down Hillsborough Boulevard. Not Hillsborough Boulevard, but just a little two-lane Hillsborough back then. But they had their backpacks, their guns, and all that, and we were observing them. And they went over, they would give out commands, and they dispersed, and they went to the Butler House, now the Historical Society, and they had a large yard, of course, so they did their maneuvers in the yard, and they would run and they would get on the ground and then they would go on their elbows, and we said, that's funny, what are they doing? Well, about 5 or 6 years later when I got drafted, I knew what they were doing because I was in training, the same thing. But they were right at the Butler House doing the maneuvers there.
We were out fishing in the ocean one day in a boat, and the British cruiser Orion chased a German freighter in to shore, and a German freighter came in so close we could hear him scraping on the bottom. And the British cruiser had fired 3 or 4 shots across his bow, tried to. But the German ship didn't stop. He went right on down and surrendered down in Port Everglades.
I can add a little something to that, an actual fact. I guess it was in the early 40s, 42 or 43, and my father was station master at the FEC in Boca Raton. He came down and picked me up in the car, and he said, we're going to go to the beach. So we went to Boca Raton to the pavilion, and there was actually some battle going on out there in the water. There was a lot of smoke and everything, but as it turned out, a German submarine, a U-boat, had either torpedoed or tried to torpedo one of the ships you're talking about of that